Global Finance, Topic 8B, Covered Interest Arbitrage, copyright Lou Gaddis. The learning objectives in this section is to understand what is covered interest arbitrage, how to compute the profits, and what are the risks of the trade. Covered interest arbitrage is borrowing in one currency, selling that in currency, and buying another, and then investing in a new currency or new country's bonds or other investments. So you can either borrow domestic, say borrow the US dollar, sell the dollar and buy another country's bonds, or you could say borrow in, say, the yen, in case of the yen carry trade, sell the yen, buy dollars, domestic currency, invest the domestic currency, the dollar, in, say, US treasuries, and then sell, say, the domestic currency and buy foreign currency. So here's the example we did from carry trades. This is one where we're borrowing in foreign. US interest rates are 3%. Yen interest rates are 1%. The spot price of the yen is 100. The forward price is 99. We're looking at a covered interest arbitrage profit strategy from borrowing $1 million yen, selling yen to buy dollars, investing in US treasuries. And then here's the key point that differentiates it from a carry trade. You enter into a forward contract to pay off the yen loan. So let's look at the cost of this strategy. I'm going to borrow 1 million yen at 1%. So I'm going to pay back 1.01 million yen, but I'm going to enter into a forward contract to buy 1.01 million yen next year. The forward price is $99. So I effectively have locked into a borrowing cost in dollars in Japan of 10,202. Now the revenue of this strategy would be to take the $1 million you just borrowed. In the spot market, buy yen. To buy dollars. So in this case, you've bought $10,000. You're then going to invest those in US Treasuries and get 3%. That's going to give me $10,300. So I have a profit of $98. A covered interest arbitrage profit of $98. So again, let's look at the steps one more time. I'm going to borrow $1 million. 1 million yen at 1%. And then I have a contract to pay off the loan. In other words, buying 1.01 million yen a year from now at 99. So it's going to cost me $10,202 to borrow 1 million yen. Those million yen I'll convert immediately in the spot market to dollars, which will give me $10,000. I'm then going to invest those $10,000 at US Treasury rates, 3%, and get $10,300. So that's covered interest arbitrage. However, you can do covered interest arbitrage by borrowing domestic currency. In other words, borrowing the dollar. Say the rupee is selling for 86.01 in spot markets, and forward points are 200. So the forward price is 86.01 plus 2.0. So that would be 88.01 is the forward price of the rupee. US interest rates are 4.9875 and rupee interest rates are 9.44. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to borrow dollars at 4.9%, buy rupees today at 86.01, invest in a rupee bond at 9.44, and then sell the proceeds of the entire bond and get dollars at an exchange rate at next year of 88.01. So let's look at the costs and revenue of the strategy. The costs of the strategy are pretty straightforward. I'm going to borrow $1,000 at 4.9875. So my costs are about $1,049. My revenue, I'm going to take $1,000, buy rupees in the spot market. I have about 86,000 rupees. I'm going to invest those 86,000 rupees at 9.44. And then that's going to give me, say, 90-some thousand rupees next period. I'm then going to sell the rupee forward or enter a contract today to sell those amount of rupees forward at the forward price. Since we're now in rupees, we now need a dollar per rupee exchange rate. And that'll get us back to dollars. So this strategy will give us 1,069, which is about a $20 profit. So let's look at this again. I'm going to borrow $1,000 at 4.9 and pay back 1,049. I then take my $1,000, I buy rupees in the spot market, I invest the rupees at 9.44, then I convert the rupees back to dollars at the forward price of 88.01, and I lock into a profit of about $20. Now, finding arbitrage can be difficult. Like I said in previous topics, the covered arbitrage will only exist if interest rate parity does not hold. Now, interest rate parity says that 1 plus the forward premium is equal to the relative interest rates. Or, in other words, I can rearrange terms here, multiplying both sides by 1 plus foreign interest rate, and see that 1 plus the domestic interest rate, according to IRP, is equal to 1 plus the foreign forward premium, times 1 plus the foreign interest rate. So this says that 1 plus the U.S. interest rate is equal to 1 plus the foreign interest rate times 1 plus the forward premium. So if I were, say, to borrow yen, when I go back to pay the yen, I have to pay back the foreign interest rate plus the forward premium. So what this turns out to be is the hedged cost of a foreign loan. However, if I were to, say, buy a Swiss bond, I would first buy the Swiss franc, invest in their bonds, get their foreign interest rate, and then when I get the proceeds of that bond, say next year, the yen may the Swiss franc in this example may appreciate. So in this case, it's also, this right side of the equation is the hedged return of a foreign investment. So it's either the hedged return of a foreign investment or it's the hedged cost of a foreign loan. And so this forward premium converts it into a dollar rate. So now we can determine whether covered interest arbitrage exists by checking out this equation. So let's look at an example. Say William Wong, an arbitrager for Hong Kong Bank, sees the following in his Bloomberg screen. Spot price of the yen is 106 with a forward price of 103.5 for a 6-month, 180-day delivery. Yen interest rates are 2% for 6 months, 4% APR. Dollar interest rates are 4% for 6 months, 8% APR. So William checks out the equation. 1 plus the U.S. interest rate, 4%. 1 plus the foreign interest rate, 2%. The yen's forward premium. Well, if I look at the yen, the spot price is 106, the forward price is 103. This is an indirect quote, so the forward premium is actually the spot minus forward over forward for an indirect quote. So what you see is the yen forward premium is 2.4%, and the yen's expected to appreciate by 2.4% and is already selling at a forward premium of that. So if I plug that in, I see that interest rates in the U.S. and Japan hedge back to the dollar are 4.5%. In other words, if I borrow at 2% in yen, when I go back to pay off my yen loan, the yen's appreciate at 2.4. This is effectively my borrowing cost in a U.S. dollar borrowing cost by borrowing yen. On the other hand, if I buy a yen bond, that gives me 2% more interest. And while I hold that bond, it gives me 4.4% more dollars, because when I sell the bond, I get dollars, I get 2.4% more. This effectively is my U.S. dollar rate of return of buying a yen bond. So it's pretty clear from this example that U.S. interest rates are actually cheap after adjusting for the forward premium, which is a surprising result, because initially I said, well, it looks like if I borrow yen at 2 and invest at 4, I'll make money. Well, no, not so fast. If I borrow yen at 2 and the yen appreciates at 2.4, I'll borrow yen at 4.5% from an American perspective in dollars. So the strategy then is going to be, let's borrow dollars at 4.5, buy yen, invest yen, get 2%, and then when the yen appreciates, or when I lock into the forward premium, effectively I could get a 4.5% return. So here's the strategy. Borrow 1 million yen at 4%, pay back $1,040,000. Take your million yen, take your $1 million, buy yen at 106, get 106 million yen, Then immediately enter into a bond that gives you 2% for 6 months yen. So I know I'm going to get 108 million yen back in 6 months. And then at that point, when I've actually all these strategies are done within 5 minutes, I'm going to borrow money and enter into a contract to pay back 1,040. The next minute, I'm going to buy 106 million yen. The next minute, I'm going to have someone invest my 106 million yen into a yen sovereign bond. It promises 108. And then the next minute, I enter into a forward contract to sell 108 million yen at 1035. That'll lock into a US dollar revenue of 1044. I have a profit of 4,638 for 5 or 10 minutes work. So what would I do if that were me? If I was William Wong, I'd do this again. I keep doing this. I do this every 5 minutes. I try to borrow $100 million and pay back 4%. And then take my 100 million and buy yen, and then buy a really big yen bond, and then enter into a forward contract to cover it. Right? I could leverage these profits by 100. However, that's going to destroy the whole strategy. By everybody finding this strategy, there's going to be pressure on all these rates to go against the strategy. If you kept borrowing interest rates, you're going to drive borrowing costs up in the US. If you keep buying the yen in the spot market, you're going to drive up the price of the yen in spot markets. So you're going to get less and less yen. If you keep buying yen bonds, you're going to drive up the price of yen bonds and drive interest rates of yen down. So that's going to go down again. And then if you keep selling yen forward for 6-month delivery, you're going to drive down the price of the yen in 6 months. Again, you're going to drive down this profit. So you're going to drive up this interest rate. You're going to drive up this spot price. You're going to drive down this interest rate. You're going to drive, and so all these things are going to work against it until the profit goes away. And you know the profit's gone when the relationship between the spot price and forward price is according to IRP. So the difference in these two exchange rates simply reflect the differences in interest rates. Now, in the real world, it's a little more difficult only because there's bid-ask spreads on spot and forward exchange rates, and there's a borrowing and lending rate in each country. So you have to borrow at borrowing rates, invest at risk-free sovereign rates. Borrowing rates, we're going to use a proxy of LIBOR. And then when you buy a currency, right, you'll buy it at the ask. When you sell currency, you'll sell it at the bid. So let's look at a real example here. So on checking Bloomberg one day, I see that 3-month sovereign yields are 4.99 in the US and 5.03 is the LIBOR rate, the London Interbank Offer Rate, which is a kind of an index of bank borrowing cost. So I could borrow in the US at 5.03 and invest risk-free at 4.99. The Swiss franc market has 3.14 sovereign rates, 3.19 borrowing rates. Again, these are 3-month rates that are annualized, so I have to divide by 4 to get interest charges. The spot price of the Swissy is 81.32, and the forward price is 81.26, and you see there's a bid-ask spread on these. So what is your profit from borrowing $1 million, buying francs, investing them, sell the expected franc investment forward to pay off the dollar loan? So if I borrow $1 million, I'm going to pay back 5.3%. I can't borrow at treasury rates, so I'm going to borrow at LIBOR rates. So I'm going to pay back $1,012,000. Notice I had to divide by 4 to get a quarterly interest. So that's the cost of my loan. I'm then going to take my $1 million and buy francs. So when I take $1 million and convert it to francs, I need a Swiss franc per dollar exchange rate. I'm going to get kind of screwed in the bid-ask spread. So I'm going to get the lowest Swiss franc per dollar exchange rate, which actually is going to be 1 over the highest dollar per Swiss franc exchange rate. So my proceeds, I'm going to get 1.2 million yen now. I'm then going to invest them at 344. That's the sovereign rate. I'm not going to be able to invest at borrowing rates. I'm then going to invest, I'm going to invest them at 314. I will get 1.2 million Swissy. I'll then enter into a forward contract immediately when I did all the spot transactions also. I enter into a contract because I know I'm going to get 1.2 million Swissy back next year. So I'll enter into a forward contract to sell the Swissy and get dollars, and I'll get screwed again. I'm going to get the lowest forward dollar per Swissy exchange rate is 81.26. So I'm going to get proceeds of $1,017,000. My costs were $1,012,000. I made $5,000. So that was an example of covered interest arbitrage with differential borrowing and lending interest rates and bid-ask spreads on spot and forward markets.